Years ago, I had a musical aha, and it's something that I want to share with you. I call it the NA system, and this NA system has 5 stages that you need to learn in order. So I'm going to take you through this one at a time, and we'll learn it together. So the first stage is, that's not the first stage, is this. Patterns. There are patterns that you're going to need to memorize, and I'm going to go show a grid here like that. And let me show you this first pattern. I'm just going to pick a line on the grid. Here we go. This first pattern is what's called a half whole. A half whole. You can think of it as 1-step, 2-step, if that's easier. 1-step, 2-step. It's called half whole. The second pattern is the opposite of that. It's whole half. So whole half. You can think of it as 2, 1. And there's one more pattern you have to learn. And you can guess what this is called. Yes, it's the whole pattern, or 2, 2, either way. So those 3 patterns, and that's all there is 3 patterns. Half whole, whole half, whole whole. All right, let's go to the next stage. Next stage is order. So there's a certain order that these 3 patterns follow, and it will follow this every time, and it will never change. So you'll want to memorize this. And here's the order of these lines. So there's 2 lines. There's 2 lines of the half whole, followed by 2 lines of the whole half here. Whole half, 2 lines of the half whole, followed by 3 lines of the whole whole. This sequence will never change, will never ever change. So memorize it just like that. And once you have that memorized, we come to the third stage, which is law. It's law number 1. Law number 1. And law number 1 is this. When you come to the end of this sequence, the third line of the whole pattern, there is a right shift, 1 column. 1 column right shift, and the whole thing starts all over again from this very beginning. So we got 2 lines of the half whole, 2 lines of the whole half, and 3 lines of the whole. And once again, here I have to put in this law number 1 again because I'm at the end. So you do another right shift and you start this pattern all over again. So basically, if this grid went up 100 feet, it would repeat itself over and over after this sequence. Law number 1. It would shift 1 to the right and it would start all over again. Okay, so that's law number 1, and it always has to be followed, okay, for this NA system to work. Now the next stage is called numbers. And this is going to be the probably the most difficult stage because you're going to have to take some time to memorize these numbers that are associated with these patterns. Now let me put them up for you. So I'm going to draw right here what I just had, that same sequence of lines. So we had 2 half holes, followed by 2 whole halves, followed by 3 whole holes. Okay. Now there's 7 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's 7 numbers, but there's a specific number for each line. You have to commit this to memory. So let me show you. This line here is the number 7 line. This line here is the number 3 line. This number is the number 6 line. This is number 2 line. This is number 5 line. This is number 1 line. This is number 4 line. You have to memorize which line in the sequence corresponds to which number. Without that, this whole NOS system will fall apart. One kind of a thing that you can use for memory is if you look, there is some kind of a pattern here. You see 1 is here. You skip down 1 line to the next and it goes to 2. You skip down 1 line, go to the next, it goes to 3. Skip down 1 line and go to the next. Remember, these would be back to back, so then that would take us back to here, is 4. Skip 5. Skip 6. Skip 7. So there is some kind of a, pattern going on, but the easiest way is just to say this over and over. 7362 514. 7362 514. You can even make a song about it. 7362 514. That song from a long time ago. But whatever you need to do to memorize these numbers to these lines, you'll want to do that right now. You might even want to put this video on pause, memorize that for a day, and come back because it will make everything else easier. Once you've done that, we're going to go to the last stage, which is called Law number 2. Law number 2. And law number 2 is this. You might have been wondering, what the heck is all this stuff? You're finally going to be able to see what this is all about. So I'm going to put the guitar fretboard. Now, this is a grid, just like what I showed you, except it's, spaced a little differently, longer and shorter, but it is a grid. Law number 2 says this. Between this G string and this B string here, there is another right shift. One right shift to the next column. That's what law number 2 says. So if you've learned all 5 stages of this, let me just tell you what you've actually learned how to do. You have learned how to create both a major and minor scale, along with all 7 modes, which, major and minor is part of that, anywhere on the guitar or bass fretboard. Let me show you what I mean. Here are what the numbers mean. Number 1 is the major scale. Number 2 is the Dorian mode. If you're not familiar with modes, you can go learn about them somewhere else. But one of the hardest things to do is to hear the context of these modes, because you have to start off on different intervals of the major scale, which changes the key. Well, using the NOS system, you can learn and hear what these sound like all in one key, so you can kind of get a context within one key. Okay, number 3 is the Phrygian mode. And let me see how to spell this real quick. Phrygian mode. Number 4 is the Lydian. Number 5, Mixolydian. Number 6 is the natural minor scale. Now, both this major and minor is part of a mode, and they have mode names, but I just don't want to complicate things too much. Just know them as major scale for 1. 6 is minor scale. 7 is the Locrian mode. So now let me show you how this all works. So here's a guitar, fretboard. Let's say I want to play a major scale. And so I'm just going to pick a note anywhere here. Let's go here. Let's do this. That's a B flat or an A sharp. And I want to start my major scale there. Well, major scale is the number 1 line. So number 1. And if you remember, well, it's kind of confusing. Let me just do this 1. Number 1 is the second line of the whole pattern. So there we go. Followed by, remember law number 1, there's a shift and it starts all over again. 2 lines of that. And then here, between these two, there's a law number 2. So I got a shift here. That there is a B flat major scale. Okay, let me show you another example. And I'm going to purposely start this up here on this string. And that's one of the definite advantages of this NOS system is typically when you learn scales, you learn it starting on this low E string and it goes all the way up to this high E string. And it just has a beginning down on this thick string end here. But a lot of times when you're playing, if you're starting somewhere up on the neck and, you know, starting on one of the middle strings, you have to kind of go back to like, okay, how did that scale go again? And it's always in the context of these low strings. What the NOS system allows you to do is start anywhere on the fretboard and you can go forward or backwards. Doesn't matter. So remember, if you want to do a minor scale starting on this note, which is an F sharp, well, a minor is the 6. It's the 6 pattern. Well, the 6 pattern is the first of the 2 whole half pattern, like that. And then right here, remember, there's law number 2. You have to shift. So you shift to the right one and 2 groupings of the whole. And here's another thing that's great. If you know this, then you know what belongs down here because you've memorized this sequence. Well, there's 2 half whole patterns right before you get to the 6. Just like that. Okay, I'm going to show you one more example, and this is kind of just an introduction to this NOS system. There's a lot more things you can do with it, but I don't want to make this video too long. But let me show you this one example. This might be the trickiest one, but let's say on this G here, all right, let's do this. Let's do here, G sharp. Let's say I want to play a Dorian mode. Jazz players use Dorian modes all the time. It's kind of a minor, but it's a little different. So all you need to know now is you start with line number 2. And line number 2 is the second line of the whole half. And then 3 lines of the whole whole. Okay, and that finishes my sequence. And I start all over. So I'm going to do a right shift, the law number 1, but yet, wait a minute. Well, this is between the G and the B string. So what happens? You have both law number 1 and law number 2 that you have to incorporate here, or actually say follow. So what happens, and the truth is when there's 2 laws, you have to follow both laws. So now you have one shift for law number 1, another shift for law number 2. So it starts here. You see that? Like that. And that is a G sharp Dorian mode. So that is the Na system. And you're going to want to work with this a little bit, but once you get all 5 stages down and you've worked with it and you've memorized these numbers, names, your whole fretboard will be completely unlocked. And by the way, I do want to tell you, if you're a bass player, this works as well. The only difference between bass and guitar is on the bass, you don't use law number 2. You only have to follow law number 1, and you can do the exact same thing, which is actually even easier than what's on the guitar. So there you have it, the Na system.